Welcome to the Services Ops Podcast. In today's episode, it's part 1 of 2 of our conversation with Mark Sloan, a longtime services leader and managing director at Asaph Advisors. In this segment, Mahesh and I had a great discussion with Mark on all things resource management and resource forecasting for services. Now, let's dive into the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Services Ops Podcast presented by Provis, the best podcast dedicated solely to the people, processes, and technology of running a services business. My name is Chris Souza, and I'm here with co-host, co-founder, and CEO of Provis, Mahesh Baxi. Mahesh, how are you today?
Wonderful. Looking forward to yet another great episode with great guest here.
A really, really great guest. All right, so let's talk about this episode. We're going to dig into a very, very important element of services operations, and that is resource management. It's a big, meaty subject. It's what we're all here for. We all try and do the best we can every single day. And to help us with this, we've got an amazing guest, absolutely one of the best in the business, deep experience leading professional services, managing director of Asaph Advisors, host of the Asaph Advisors podcast, Mark Sloan. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you guys. Appreciate being here.
All right. So let's get straight into it, Mark. First, let's talk a little bit about you. What do you do at Asaph Advisors? And maybe a couple fun facts about yourself.
Sure. I tongue-in-cheekly say we're the doctor's doctor. So we are the consultants to professional services organizations. Come to this personally, having a 30-year career in services. I did 12 years at Accenture. I left because I had a young family, and I decided, hey, I just can't be on the road all the time, can't do all this, and went to a job spec that said, hey, come lead a team of 8 consultants. And I thought, all right, that'll be a nice job for a few years, gonna be home with the kids. And long story short, in the span of 4.5 years, we grew it to 1,600 people operating around the globe. So my nice little day job was a little bit more intense. But through that, by sheer necessity, was forced to really dig into what does it take to effectively run a professional services organization, right? How do you scale it? How do you put processes in place? How do you evolve those processes as the organization matures and grows? And having left that about 15 years ago, I've now been the doctor's doctor, working with other consulting and professional services organizations on how to make changes to drive efficiency, effectiveness, and and structure.
I like it, and I think you and Mahesh have similar experiences in this concept of, hey, take over this little department and we'll just see how it goes. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're managing a lot of people, a lot of resources, and a lot of complex processes, right, Mahesh? That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. It's also known as leaky bucket in different parts of the organization. So it's a simple job. Oh, you just have to stop the leaky bucket. That's it.
That's great. That's great. And it's kind of funny, like when we think about, let's bring it back to services operations. There are a lot of leaky buckets out there, and being able to recognize what is truly leaking and what is a really meaningful problem that you need to solve right away, or just, hey, that leak's not as bad as this leak over here, let's just leave it alone for now. I think it's a familiar feeling everybody has that makes operational decisions every single day. So let's talk about one of the big leaky buckets, potentially. Hopefully not. If not, that's what people like Mark Sloan are for. Resource management. So Mark, I think you've got some really great insights and perspective on resource management. So I'd love to offer you the mic, if you will. And for our audience, what we like to do is get a lot into people, processes, and technology, right? So talk about some of the best things that people should be thinking about when it comes to resource management.
Sure. And to me, resource management's really, it's the most important thing that a professional services leader organization needs to focus on. People are the essence of the services work, right? A manufacturing company is going to work on their manufacturing plant, make sure that procedure process is going well. And with services, if we can mobilize the right person at the right place at the right time, 90+% of the job that needs to be done is taken care of, right? Because if you have the right solution architect in there, they're going to architect the right solution, right? If you need a strong development team and to do some custom work, and you get those folks in there, they're going to get the job done. I come out of this history with the big 6 of having a strong implementation methodology, and that is critically important, right? But it still doesn't trump resource management. And I always go back to my experience, getting hired on a job spec of managing 8 consultants. As I got to this organization, they launched a new software product, and it was actually their first software product. They had been an outsourcing company, and they said, "Oh yeah, we want you to manage the implementation team too." And the sales team there, was super excited, right? Because they were transitioning from 2-3 year deals to try and consummate an outsourcing deal, right? And it was either 3 years of their time invested in, and they got a big commission, or they got nothing, to selling licensed software. And they thought, wow, the riches are going to pour down on them because, hey, they'll just be closing a new deal every month. And I had a sales VP who was telling everyone that would listen, Sloan's going to be 500 people short if all these deals hit. And I kept looking back at my job spec that said 8, right? No one was going to let me go open 500 racks. But I knew what he was doing. He was sort of setting me up for if I was ever one person short and we didn't make revenue for the quarter, his guys should still get comped and I should get flogged, right? And I might be hyperbolizing. I might not be, but it was along those lines. And so I had to really figure out a way to get ahead of the curve. And so I looked at the pipeline, and Mike was right. If all these deals hit on the exact same day, we needed like 475 people to deliver against these. When you looked at potential close date, right, the number changed. It went down. When you looked at the percentage probability of win, that number went down. And we got in this habit of taking, okay, yeah, there's demand for 450 resources if all these things hit on the same day, to if they hit over time according to the probability, we're 25 to 30 people short, right? A much easier number to get your head wrapped around, easy number to plan for. And so we held a meeting and said, hey, look, here's what the data is telling us. So I'm going to go hire 25 people. And, finance spoke up, even the head of sales spoke up, said, well, wait a minute, those dates might slip. And, but we got in this habit of translating data to actionable information that we could act on. And, through that, we grew to 1,600 people. Our utilization never went down by more than 2 or 3 points, up or down by 2 or 3 points month to month, because we had the levers that we could pull, right? We kept a certain number of contractors engaged, so we could cut those loose if we needed to, pretty quickly. We kept an open pipeline for recruiting, hiring new resources. So if something popped in early, we had the people we could tap into. But it was really about transitioning from reacting to what somebody was telling us to being much more proactive and using data to make informed decisions.
Yeah, Mahesh, I noticed you had some pretty strong reactions there. It looks like you've had similar conversations with similar groups, huh?
It's amazing, Mark, what you just mentioned, right? It's I'll tell you a couple of stories and then kind of get into the reactive and proactive part. And I think there's a next stage now above proactive, with all the latest technologies. So, I work for a company called Aptus, which was a category defining quote to cash company. Tremendous growth, amazing journey. We were growing leaps and bounds every month, every quarter. And we were in the business of automating quote to cash journey on back of product CPQ, right? But the product CPQ or quote to cash requires a tremendous amount of implementations, either on your own or through partners or through customers. And it's a collaborative effort because it's a massively complex affair. And so as we were growing leaps and bounds, I was responsible to lead customer success and professional services. And when I kind of walked in, I saw like everyone being gladiators, right? Everyone was fighting. Everywhere there were escalations. Every day there you get, more and more escalations, and everyone is like trying to fight as best as they can.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? I mean, that's, at some point in time in that journey, it's okay, but it's not sustainable. It's not scalable. And the most important thing in the services business, as we all know, is the customer experience. As you are fighting as best as you can as gladiator, the customer experience is the one that gets compromised. And in the services business or any business, once the customer confidence and experience is kind of dips, to bring it back up to the referenceable stage, it's a mammoth effort, right? And so, I crafted a story for some other time, which is basically crafted the journey to become trusted advisors from being gladiators, and that really worked out well. But in this entire thing, Mark, what you mentioned is, we were closing about 55 to 60 new logos every quarter. Now you can imagine 55 to 60 new logos, each of them requiring implementations, each implementations requiring resources of different kind. And going back to what you said, there was absolutely zero visibility, right? I mean, yes, the pipeline was there, but there wasn't any methodical way to say, well, do you need 5 resources or 50 resources or 500 resources, right?
Mhm.
And the other thing in services business, unlike product and product CPQ, Mark, as you know, you never have visibility saying that, okay, on 1st of April, I need 50 resources. It never works like that because the projects have a spread. The projects have a resource ramp and resource ramp down, right? And even when you are selling the deal, I'm not talking about the execution. Obviously, the execution has the resource ramp and all those things figured out as part of your project management methodologies. But when you are selling, you're not selling and saying, okay, I'm going to start 50 resources on April 1st, unless you are, of course, doing a staff augmentation. But even then, consuming 50 resources for customers on day one is not going to happen, right?
Mhm.
And so when we talk about the visibility and resource management, at Aptus, I kid you not, at a leadership level, we used to spend probably about 40% of our time in meetings discussing about resource requirements, resource management, who should do what, all of that, massive Excel spreadsheets, and all of these 400 resources in services that we had, like who is available, who is going to become available, who is fit for what. 40% is a lot of time of a leadership team, right? Just trying to figure out, and everyone had the right intention, which is the customer experience, but it just did not have the systems, right? And then moving from that reactive to proactive, is absolutely necessity. But going back to what you said, Mark, I think, how do you even become from proactive to becoming predictive, right? In a meaningful way, which is where your data in terms of what you are selling, what you have sold in the past, what you have executed, and how you have executed in the past gives you a lot of insights into the resource management. And I think that's the if being reactive is 1.0, proactive is 2.0, then I think predictive is the 3.0, which is where the customers should be really thinking about.
Yeah, that's really great. And Mark, I think you guys both said a couple of really interesting things that popped into my head is this idea of scaling, right? That's everybody's dream, right? You have a great customer experience, and so you get more customers and more referenceable, you get more projects coming through. All of a sudden, you go from 8 consultants to an organization of 1,600 people. But something that you were doing, Mark, you said it from the very early stages, is using that sales forecast to inform your resource strategy. And it couldn't have been the same conversation when you were at 8 people to when you scaled up higher. So
Right.
what are some of the transition points that you made during that journey? And what are some of the data points that you were looking at different levels, at different stages?
Yeah. Well, I think when you're, 8, 15, 20 people, it's relatively easy to sit around the table, with a whiteboard or a spreadsheet with resource names, projects, pipeline ideas, and, and just say, well, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to slot the chairs and, get people in the seats at the right time. And I think PS execs are good at that, right? PS resources are good at solving the problem at hand, right? It's what we're trained on. We're going to go implement software. We're going to change a process. Let's figure out how we do that, right? And we do it. I think to really be effective as a PS leader, right? You've got to get out of reactive. You got to get to proactive, predictive. But the way to do it is leveraging the data that you've got, leveraging the sales pipeline, translate that to a resource pipeline over time, right? Break that down by roles and skills that you're going to need. Again, at 50, 100 people, this could potentially be done in a spreadsheet, an access database. Beyond that, you're going to want some type of, professional services automation, CPQ tool to support this. But you're just, taking what you're doing in that spreadsheet and, and getting it into technology so that month over month, you can look at, here's the demand by role. Here's the supply against that, that demand. Do I have a gap? Do I have a surplus? Do I have the right number of headcount, but a skills mismatch, right? I've got 3 architects available, but I need 10 developers, right? Do I need to do some cross training? Do I have a spike in demand that says, go get a contractor to fill this? Do I have ongoing demand that I can't fill, which says, hey, let's get with HR and start the recruiting process so that we can get in there. So it's really, that maturity curve, right? You go to 3rd grade, 2nd grade, you learn, math and multiplication. By the time you're in high school and college, you're doing some advanced stuff. And that's really the scale that you're on here is, as you grow, you're going to have to leverage technology to support that. The process is going to change some, but it's still the basics of what's my demand, what are the resources against that demand, and how does that compare to the supply of resources with those skills that I have.
Absolutely bang on, Mark. I think the 2 additional things that complicates this entire process, if you will, and makes it so critical is, number one, when the deal is done and deal is sold, many times, even today, because the deals are done on Excel spreadsheets, unless they're using something like Provis, let's say you put a $500,000 proposal in front of a customer. Customer says, well, I have $400K budget. Well, what's the natural thing that you would do? You would, okay, I want to win the deal. I'm going to extend 20% discount, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have extended 20% discount, but when it comes to, okay, you won the deal, you have to manage it in now 400K with maybe, 38% margin. But when the time comes to resource management, not only the things that you mentioned, which is you have to look at the skill set, you have to look at the availability, but now the most important thing you have to look at is, do you understand where this resource are going to come from so that you can maintain that 38% margin? Because in that 20% discount that I just gave, I blew my San Francisco based resource, right? But the resource management team doesn't know that. I'm like, oh, well, okay, the thing says, the project is in San Francisco. I'm going to assign a San Francisco based resource. Well, guess what? Now you have assigned the most expensive resource to the highly discounted project, and you are expected to still make the margin. It's not going to happen, right?
Right.
That's one. And the second is really in all of this, you talked about the skill set. And in this skill set, I mean, this is a personal experience at Aptus and many other companies. It's like, the natural instinct is, okay, let's look for the heroes who are going to save this customer or who are going to make sure that this customer is going to be successful. And there are only those many heroes. And so the struggle is always, okay, how do you put the team together, which is kind of leveraged because you have to maintain your margins and you have to, do all of that. But at the same time, you have to manage your delivery risk. In this entire process that we talked about so far, unless and until you are really systematic and automated to acquire and organize your data when it comes to services quoting, there's no way that anyone can tell that not only I gave 20% discount, but I changed my resource mix, I changed my resource location, I changed my ramp up time, all of that stuff. Nobody can tell you what is the delivery risk that you just created. Or eliminated, right? And that is a significant impact. You talked about services leaders. For me, as a services leader, it's not just about staffing. I need to know what is the delivery risk we are taking with this staffing, right?
Right.
And
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's really a lot of times, right? People like to staff a role because, okay, cross that off my list. You really need to staff a team, right? You need to create balance across the portfolio. So, hey, if this project has the Uber project manager, well, then this other project needs the Uber solution architect, right? And this third project needs the best development team or configuration team. And everybody wants the expert, but you've got to split those across the portfolio to your point, to balance the risk, and ensure that you're going to get all the jobs done, not just the job of one sales rep who's pounding their fist on the table the hardest.
absolutely, absolutely.
And what does it take to kind of instill that discipline within your resource strategy, Mark? Right? To say, like, to have discipline in the organization and say, we got a great big deal coming through. This is going to be amazing. Let's give all our best. and forget everyone else, like that probably takes discipline as an organization. Like, how do you advise companies to kind of maintain that balance?
Well, it's ultimately about this concept of being much more proactive, right?
Mm.
I think without a resource forecast, you're reacting, right? If you've got the forecast, a month, 2 weeks, a week before, you can sit around the table with leaders in sales and in product and other parts of the organization that are going to be involved and say, here's how we are thinking about approaching these 2, 3, 7 projects. Here's the strategy we've got for staffing these, right? Because we want to make sure this client's happy, that client's happy, this client's happy. And again, by being proactive, you invite these other stakeholders to participate. They might say, well, hey, this client doesn't need the best project manager because they've got a great project manager. So let's swap those two out, but give me the better solution architect over here. But again, by being proactive, by forecasting, you're giving yourself and the organization time to make those decisions, as opposed to this thing started on Monday and on Wednesday you're mobilizing some people and your entire organization is frustrated because they don't know what's going on and then they don't like the decisions that were made. It's really about bringing everybody to the table to collectively make those decisions.
And Mark, I'm going to bring you into a tricky territory here. In the last episode, we had a guest, Joe Longo, and we talked about kind of the concept of swim lanes and how each of us, or is it advisable for leaders to stay in their lane? And we had a great discussion about that. But the point is, depending, I'm curious what you have seen in different organizations that you have worked with, in terms of usually the services leaders are responsible for their lane, which is services delivery, services margin. Sales is responsible for making sure that the sale happen and there is aggressive goals for that, and marketing and so on and so forth, right? So I absolutely love the concept of getting everybody onto the around the table and make sure that we are making the decision collaboratively. When everyone is swimming in different lanes, what have you seen work better in that situation? Because if I'm a salesperson, you come, in your example, I would say, hey, I've been tasked to sell aggressively. What do you want me to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say I want you to continue to sell aggressively. I think the thing I would add to it, I've never seen a salesperson that stays in their lane. They seem to be in everybody else's lane to tell product how to do product better, tell services how to do implementations better. So it's really about hey, look, we're leaders. We don't have lanes, right? Our teams have lanes, but as leaders, we have to be above those lanes, right? We've got to make collective decisions for the organization and our customers that are in the best interest, optimizing that, right? There are going to have to be sacrifices, but that's what we as leaders will do. We'll make those trade-offs, right? We'll decide who gets the all-star solution architect, who gets the all-star development team. But we're going to balance things out. Invariably, there'll be some client that needs the best of everybody, but because we've done the trade-offs, we've collaborated, we've worked together, we can make that decision together, right? And it doesn't feel to the PS exec then like you're being put upon, you're being told what to do. On the flip side, by keeping sales informed, right? They know that you're thinking about it. My experience in working with sales execs in multiple companies is when they try and start making decisions, it's because they have a lack of visibility to decision making, right? And so they don't know what you're doing. They're out front with the customer. They're going to start making decisions if they don't know that decisions are being made or why they're being made or don't agree with them. So it's, a lot of times I'll start talking to customers about this and bringing everyone together, and they think, well, this is going to be a lot of extra time. It actually isn't. I mean, it's like an exercise program, right? You make a New Year's resolution that you're going to lose weight and get in shape. January's tough, right? That first month of bringing everyone together, it's hard, right? Because there's resistance, there's lethargy, but you start getting into practice. February is a little bit easier, right? You want to get up and do your exercise. You want to start doing those trade-offs. By March, you're in much better shape. You can't imagine not doing this, right? Because it feels easy. It's good. Everybody's on the same page, and you're really operating more as a team.
That's a great answer. And what we discussed in the last episode is, for the leadership, everyone should stay in their lane as long as there's only one lane.
Right, right.
Yeah, that was really good. So let's get Mark and Mahesh, let's get your perspective here and wrapping this up. You said something very important about visibility for the sales team, right? And so we determined you want to be able to forecast out as far as possible your resource strategy the best you can. We also know some really great ways to translate the sales forecast into your resource forecast. How do you then take your information as a PS leader and then bundle it up in a way that sales can understand, right? Because it's a two-way street, right? They're going to bring you information, you need to bring them information. So what information, what data should sales be aware of? And then how do you package that up for that persona, for that leader?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is all part of the governance that I have used myself and then I introduce with clients, where whether it's twice a month, once a month, you're reviewing the data and ultimately the information with them, right? So you're saying, hey, here's the list of the pipeline. Here are the resource needs across those. Here are where we have gaps, right? Here's when we have resources coming available. Here are 3-4 different scenarios we could play out, right? We could move these resources from here to here and get this done, and this might get delayed a little. We could go out and contract to close a gap, right? If you really believe these things are going to close, we could ask this customer to push this out by 3 weeks, right? And then they will get the best of the best to staff all that. But again, it's about bringing options and getting into that discussion around, let's make a decision with these options, or if you have a better one, let's or another one, let's consider that too. And I contrast that with the answer being no, we can't start that project without any detail or whatever, right? And I see this with PS execs, and it's because they've been beaten a few times by some sales folks, and it's caused them pain. And so they start to, do their work, but they shut down when they're dealing outside of, the services group or directly with the customer. To me, this is really about, here's the situation. Here's what the data and the analysis says. Here are 3 options, 4 options, 2 options that we could pursue. Let's all agree on which one we're going to go after.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, Mark. And to add to that, right, the job of a PS exec or a delivery exec is a little bit broader and tricky because you're expected to stay in your lane, you're expected to deliver risk management, margins, resource management, all of that stuff, and yet it's a collaborative job, and not just between sales and PS. Think about it. I mean, when you are 100 people, it's a different story. You still have those challenges, may not be acute enough, but when you get to 1,600 and 16,000 and in 30,000, like some of our customers, right? You can no longer manage this on Excel spreadsheets. You can no longer manage this based on, one-off informations and stuff like that. And it's not just about sales and PS anymore, because the resource management is a function of a lot of different things. You have to involve your recruitment team. You have to involve your HR team. You have to involve your finance team. Why? Because when you're talking about, 1,600 or 16,000 resources, the finance is also interested, because unlike your product selling, where you sell the product, you collect the money and you are done. Here, you are doing a lot of different types of engagement. Maybe some of those are fixed bid, maybe some of those are milestone based, maybe some of those are T&M. You need to know that if I need to hire 500 people, what does that revenue forecast looks like along with the resource forecast? And without that, the finance person cannot make a decision like, hey, I don't have money to hire 500 people. But if they had all of that built into the financial forecast as well, then okay, it's not bad. I'm getting so much money upfront. I'm getting this money every month and every quarter and all that kind of stuff, right? And so it's important. Same thing for the recruitment and HR teams. Like, okay, it's not 500 like tomorrow. It's spread like this, because that's where the like at Provus, we bring our sold the data or the deals that you are selling and the deals that you have executed together and give you that visibility. This is where I think the automation is so critical for PS leader to execute the job they're expected to execute in a collaborative manner, as you said, Mark.
No, I absolutely agree. And anytime I've done it myself or I've worked with clients, I make sure to say, hey, look, the VP or director of finance needs to be part of this discussion as well, so that They're hearing from services, what services believes the situation is what they need. They're hearing it from sales or the business unit, what they're driving with the customer. And then HR is there as well, because if they're going to need to recruit either for hire or for contracting, right? You don't want separate conversations. You want everyone involved so that everyone can sit around the table and say, do you think you can go hire 10 people in the next 2 weeks so we can get this started? Or, do we need to go back to a couple of these customers and ask them to push out 2 or 3 or 4 weeks until we get them? But just, short circuiting the phone tag that you can, or email tag that you can have by having everyone around that table with this, forecast analysis, the data in front of them, everybody can make much quicker and more impactful decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. That's great. We hope you enjoyed this episode. This was part 1 of our conversation with Mark. Part 2 of this series, we'll be talking about the fundamentals of selling services in product organizations. That's it for now. Thank you to our audience. Please like and subscribe to the Services Ops podcast. Find us on LinkedIn and have a fun time being a great services leader.